Long ago, before cities existed, humans lived in small, wandering tribes. Survival was the only thing that mattered in this harsh and unforgiving world. People depended entirely on each other to find food and stay safe from predators. In these tight groups, harmony was absolutely necessary for the tribe to survive. But human nature has always been complex and highly unpredictable. Disagreements inevitably arose even in the most cooperative families. Two hunters might argue intensely over who actually brought down the deer. Families might fight over the warmest and driest spot near the cave fire. Someone might eat more than their fair share of the freshly gathered berries. Without a police force or written laws, early humans had to adapt quickly. They could not afford to let violence tear their small community apart. Physical fighting was dangerous because an injured hunter could not work. A wounded member instantly became a heavy burden to the entire group. Therefore, preventing serious violence was a matter of life and death for everyone. The first layer of conflict resolution was always simple social pressure. In a group of 30 people, everyone knew everyone else's daily business. There was absolutely no privacy in a prehistoric hunter-gatherer camp. If someone acted selfishly, the whole tribe noticed the behavior immediately. People would start whispering and glaring at the offending person from across the fire. Gossip was an incredibly powerful tool for maintaining basic social order. No one wanted to be the outcast of their tight-knit, chosen family. Being disliked meant you might receive less food during hard winter times. When glares and whispers failed, direct verbal confrontation was the next step. Disputes were often settled through loud arguments in front of the whole group. The entire tribe would gather around to carefully watch the conflict unfold. This public display allowed the community to judge the situation for themselves. People would voice their opinions and shout their support for one side or the other. The collective opinion of the tribe usually decided who was ultimately right. Once the group reached a consensus, the argument usually ended right there. Refusing to accept the group's collective decision was a very dangerous move. If an argument became too heated, the elders stepped in to help mediate. Elders were deeply respected because surviving to an old age required great wisdom. They had seen countless disputes and knew exactly how to calm angry minds. An elder would sit the two angry individuals down near the warmth of the fire. They would force both sides to speak slowly and explain their personal grievances. The elder acted as a guide rather than a judge with absolute power. Their primary goal was not to punish but to restore peace to the tribe. They reminded the angry individuals that the tribe needed them to cooperate. Sometimes a simple public apology was enough to mend the broken relationship. Other times, physical actions were required to make things right again. This basic concept of restitution was vital to early prehistoric justice. If you angrily broke someone's wooden spear, you had to give them yours. If you ruined a flint tool, you had to spend days crafting a new one. If you took someone's food, you had to share your entire next hunt with them. Restitution repaired the material damage and beautifully restored the social bond. It proved to everyone that the wrongdoers still valued their place in the community. However, not all conflicts were easily solved with a new spear or an apology. Some offenses were considered serious direct threats to the group's survival. Hoarding precious food during a brutal winter was considered a terrible crime. Endangering the tribe by falling asleep on night watch was completely unforgivable. For these serious offenses, the tribe used the crushing weight of public shaming. The offender might be forced to sit outside the main circle of warmth. They might be completely ignored by everyone for days or even weeks. This silent treatment was terrifying for a deeply social prehistoric human. Isolation meant extreme vulnerability to hidden predators and freezing weather. The psychological pain of being ignored was often worse than any physical pain. Most offenders quickly begged for forgiveness just to rejoin the warm group. They would publicly admit their fault and loudly promise to do better next time. The tribe would then perform a small, comforting ritual of reconciliation. They might share a special meal to symbolize the completely renewed bond. Forgiveness was necessary because they simply could not afford to lose healthy people. But major problems arose when someone refused to change their destructive behavior. Some individuals were naturally aggressive and constantly started violent physical fights. Others repeatedly stole food despite being warned and publicly shamed multiple times. When an individual became a chronic danger, the tribe finally had to act. They did not have sturdy buildings or prisons to lock the dangerous person away. Building a strong cage would waste valuable time and incredibly scarce resources. Feeding a captive prisoner would take vital food out of the mouths of working members. Instead, they used the most severe and permanent punishment available to them. The absolute ultimate penalty in the ancient prehistoric world was total banishment. The elders and the strongest hunters would physically confront the troublemaker together. They would hand the person a basic weapon and point far away from the camp. The silent message was clear that they were no longer part of this tribe. Being permanently exiled was practically a slow death sentence in the ancient world. A lone human could not easily hunt large, dangerous animals or defend against wolf packs. They could not stay awake all night, every night to keep their protective fire burning. Sickness or a simple twisted ankle could easily mean a slow, lonely demise. Knowing this truly terrifying consequence kept most aggressive people in line. The paralyzing fear of banishment was stronger than any modern concrete prison wall. It forced people to consciously control their tempers and respect their neighbors. Occasionally, two completely different tribes might clash over a prime hunting ground. These inter-tribal conflicts were much harder to resolve quickly and peacefully. Strangers did not share the same trusted elders or deep social bonds. Violent skirmishes did happen, but full-scale bloody war was incredibly rare. Fighting another tribe risked far too many valuable lives for too little gain. Often smart tribes would completely avoid each other to prevent unnecessary bloodshed. If they did meet peacefully, they might attempt to trade goods instead of blows. Exchanging unique, shiny stones or rare shells could turn nervous rivals into allies. Marriage between neighboring tribes was another highly common way to build lasting peace. When families heavily intermarried, the chance of future violence dropped significantly. Through all these varied methods, early humans maintained order in their chaotic world. They relied heavily on deep empathy and mutual understanding to survive the wild. They recognized that their individual survival depended entirely on the collective whole. Every custom and unwritten rule served to aggressively protect the vulnerable group. Justice was never about blind revenge or complex, confusing legal arguments. It was about keeping the fire burning bright and the young children fed. It was about making absolutely sure there were enough strong hunters for the next day. The system was rough, primitive, and sometimes deeply unforgiving to individuals. But it was incredibly effective for the harsh, brutal environment they lived in. It laid the complex foundational psychology for all modern human morality. Our modern concepts of fairness and justice literally began around those ancient campfires. The deep urge to seek mediation when wronged is an ancient inherited instinct. The heavy guilt we feel when we act selfishly originally kept our ancestors alive. Even today, we heavily use social pressure and workplace gossip to enforce unwritten rules. We still deeply value the calm wisdom of older, experienced members of our society. The invisible tools of prehistoric justice are still clearly visible in modern human behavior. We have merely replaced the wise elders with judges and the campfires with courtrooms. But the powerful underlying desire for community harmony remains exactly the same today. Looking back, we clearly see that laws are just formalized versions of these ancient habits. Prisons are just a modern, highly structural equivalent of the ancient fear of banishment. Long before written words, our ancestors securely wrote the first laws in their hearts. They intimately understood that profound unity was their greatest weapon against a harsh planet. Disputes were entirely natural, but tearing the fragile tribe apart was a choice they refused to make. Whenever sudden anger flared up, the chilling winter wind reminded them of the cold reality. They had to stick firmly together, or they would surely perish alone in the dark. So they talked, they argued, they shamed, they compromised, and they ultimately forgave. They successfully built a functioning society without a single stone wall or iron bar. Their primitive justice was immediate, highly practical, and deeply rooted in sheer survival. The fascinating story of early human conflict resolution is a story of incredible resilience. It clearly shows that basic social order does not strictly require a police force to exist. It only requires a group of people who desperately and truly need each other to live. In the end, the complete lack of laws made them more personally responsible for their own actions. They had to actively, aggressively participate in maintaining the peace every single day. There was no higher official authority to call upon except their own collective tribal conscience. This brilliant self-regulating system allowed early humanity to successfully spread across the globe. It powerfully helped them survive terrible ice ages, fierce predators, and widespread famine. Every time a bitter dispute was settled peacefully, the human race took a major step forward. They slowly learned to compromise and to genuinely see the value in another person's perspective. These vital early lessons in basic diplomacy paved the way for modern complex civilizations. Without the crucial ability to resolve conflicts, without prisons, we would simply not be here. The enduring legacy of the prehistoric peacemakers lives on in every modern courtroom today. They beautifully taught us that true justice is fundamentally about healing the wounded community. Severe punishment was merely a desperate last resort when all other gentle methods failed completely. The absolute true goal was always peaceful restoration and guaranteed mutual survival. As we face complex modern conflicts, we can still learn much from our ancient ancestors. They intrinsically knew that bitterly dividing a community only made absolutely everyone weaker. They clearly understood that shared natural resources required heavy shared community responsibilities. Every single voice deeply mattered when the ultimate fate of the whole tribe was at stake. The absolute loudest angry argument was always infinitely better than the quietest hidden murder. Simple words were effectively used as tools to peacefully disarm violence before it could strike. Genuine empathy was never a weakness, but rather a crucial, essential survival strategy. Those who could not ever forgive were viewed as dangerous as those who could not hunt. The social balance of the group was a delicate, invisible web that everyone aggressively protected. To selfishly break that web was to instantly invite absolute disaster upon everyone you deeply loved. Therefore, endless patience was carefully cultivated right alongside physical strength and endurance. Quietly listening became just as highly important as loudly speaking in the tribal circle. The respected elders continuously passed down stories of past conflicts to carefully teach the youth. These powerful ancient stories served as the very first legal precedents for the human race. They sternly warned of the massive dangers of greed and the fatal cost of unchecked pride. Through constant campfire storytelling, the vital rules of society were ingrained in every child. When inevitable conflicts did suddenly arise, the exact steps to solve them were already well known. Everyone actively played a crucial part in the primitive justice system of the ancient world. It was a beautifully raw, deeply honest, and ultimately highly successful way to live together. The strong spirit of community was their only law, and their shared survival was their ultimate judge.